So that's getting up. I'm very excited to chat with all of you today. I think I've done very few webinars this year, so I'm very excited to get started today. I'm also really excited because we're talking about customer-centric growth, which obviously with Hotjar, that's our jam. That's my jam in general. So really excited to get chatting about that. And specifically interested in having a little UX mix into that. So if you could go to the next slide for me, Jess. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about UX mix. And with us today to really get us in that direction, in that UX mindset, is the wonderful Sarah Wilson-Reissmann. She is a longtime friend of Hotjar. She actually did a chat with us at Hot Sauce specifically about that UX mindset, getting you in that headspace, even if that's not in your profession. So this is kind of an ode to that. But Sarah is a UX UI team lead at Canyon Bikes. And with us as well, we have Jess Ashworth, who is from Hotjar, all things content, all things wonderful. And she's going to talk to us a little bit today. And of course, there's myself, Chris Van Ballen. I'm the customer education lead. You've probably seen us. There's multiple of me, sorry. You've probably seen me on a few other webinars as well. But yeah, all things customer education, helping everybody get up and running with using Hotjar. So real quick before I pass it over to Jess and we can just get cracking, I'm going to go over the agenda of what we're going to cover today. So first, quick intro, customer centricity, what's it about, why it's important. We're then going to hand it off to Sarah and talk about Canyon Bicycles and their journey, challenges they've faced. Also, their user research aspects of it, right? So how they got to reach out to their users and as well as how you can do that. And then hopping into it, UX mindset, how can you do it? How can you achieve it no matter what your role is? In the end, we're going to whip it all together. We're going to do a Q&A to see what questions you all have. During this time, or when Jess and Sarah are talking, do feel free to click on the Q&A button at the bottom. If you go down to your little Zoom screen, at the bottom it says Q&A. You can submit any questions you have there, and we will answer that during the Q&A session. Also, do not be afraid to put anything into chat. We can definitely answer questions as they come up. If they're something that we want to also ask again for the group, we'll do that at the end as well. But do utilize both those areas if you have any questions. So to kick us off, I'm going to hand it over to the wonderful Jess.
Thank you. Sorry, I accidentally moved my mouse and it moved the slides. So thank you for the welcome, Carissa, and hi to everyone who's joining us. As Carissa mentioned, I'm a content designer at Hotjar. I've been here for about 2.5 years, and I've worked across, I think, all of our main tools, so heat maps, recording, surveys, feedback. But since we grew the team, yay, we have more people now. I'm exclusively designing for our Ask and Engage products. And as a content designer, I am all about creating clear digital experiences that resonate with our users and help them use the platform successfully. And let me tell you that Hotjar's value of putting the customer at the heart of everything we do isn't just a trend or a buzzword. It's a real game changer. If you think about it, when you prioritize your customers' needs, their preferences, their pain points, you're not just designing products or services anymore. You're actually building and fostering really long-term relationships. And in today's competitive market, those relationships are going to be what set you apart and drive this sustainable growth. In fact, not only can customer-centric companies grow their revenues around 4 to 8% faster than their competitors, but they can also reap higher profits as a result. And as well as this, by focusing on improving customer experiences, it can actually lead to quite significant cost savings because it's about 5 times as expensive to acquire new customers as it is to keep your existing ones happy. And besides boosting profits, there are a lot of other advantages as well. So prioritizing customer centricity helps companies to enhance the trust and satisfaction and loyalty that their users feel when using those products or buying the services. And these positive interactions with customer service teams like our lovely Carissa and her colleagues. So they contribute to more than 2/3 of customer loyalty, which is far, far more than the influence of like brand or price perceptions. Like all of that together, loyalty is way up there. And the studies so that actually the majority of customers want brands to get to know them. We're always tracked online with cookies and so on. And over 2/3 of people would actually happily share their data if it leads to this more tailored and specific online experience. But you don't need to take my word for it, because we have Sarah here today, who's, as we mentioned before, she's a long-time partner with Hotjar and has done various talks in the past, and is an expert in all things UX and customer centricity. So please, I'll pass over to you now, and let's give Sarah a good, warm, virtual welcome.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the nice introduction. Also, huge thanks to Jess and Carissa and Tracy and everyone at Hotjar for inviting me to come and talk to you all today. As they both said, I'm a big Hotjar fan. We've been using it at Canyon since I started. I rely on Hotjar a lot, which I will tell you a little bit about in the next 20 to 30 minutes. But maybe first, who am I and why am I here to talk to you besides being a big fan of Hotjar? So I am actually the UX UI team lead at Canyon. I started at Canyon a little over 3 years ago. To be quite honest, I was the third employee on our digital experience design team, and now there are about 18, 19, maybe 20 of us. So we have grown quite rapidly over the last few years, which is extremely exciting. And the challenges and the ambitions have gotten bigger and more fun as well. I am actually a UX person. This is why this is all about UX. But very recently, I actually took on the UI team as well. So now I'm the UX UI team lead. And I have amazing UX designers, UI designers, and also one UX writer, which is really exciting. If you're looking for me on the weekends, you'll probably find me in the forest, normally on the Alsterwanderweg in Hamburg. I am a gravel cyclist. I just upgraded to a Grizzle CFSL ETAP. I don't know if any of you guys are bike fans or Canyon fans. Oh man, this bike is amazing and I am loving it so much and I can only recommend it. It is a fantastic bicycle. As I said, I'm basically Jason Bourne. I'm originally from the United States. I should also say I'm getting over a bit of a cold, which is why I sound maybe a little gruff, but yeah, forgive me. I'm also British and I'm also German. So I live in Hamburg and I've lived here for about 11 years, which my German should be a bit better. But luckily we have so many amazing international communities where I don't have to speak German, which is really great for me. And probably most importantly, I'm a tireless user advocate. So before I transitioned into UX, I was actually a psychotherapist. I worked with couples in the United States. I have my master's in counseling psychology. So I've always been super passionate and interested in understanding why people do the things that they do. What are their motivations? What are their needs? And how can I help them actually get to where they want to be? Which, as you can see, really translates into user experience design. But I'm also really passionate about helping anybody outside of the UX profession bring more of a UX mindset and more customer centricity into your role. And I think that what you'll find in this afternoon is maybe some tips and tricks about how you can do that, no matter what your role is. As Carissa mentioned, I actually gave a talk, which is maybe a bigger picture talk about bringing a UX mindset into your job, no matter what your role is, at Hot Sauce in New York in November. And there is a YouTube recording of that. So I think we'll share that at the end if you're interested in watching that. And what I wanted to do in this talk is actually just dive deep a little bit more into our specific case at Canyon and what we do to try to stay on top of what's going on for our customers. So I think we should jump right in. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Canyon. I would love if you can put in the chat, maybe if anybody is familiar with Canyon or has a Canyon. I would just love to see where you guys are coming from. Or are you cyclists? Are you never been on a bike in your life? Nothing? People are still typing? I'm not sure. Ah, great. Okay. Fantastic. Sister has a Canyon. Know them, love them from Marks. Hi, Marks. That's great. Yes, Lisa, we know you have a grizzle. That's fantastic. Oh, we have a Scott rider. It's okay. We forgive you. You're still allowed to be here. Just kidding. Oh, this is fantastic. Oh, you're in Steamboat Springs. I'm originally from Colorado, from Boulder. How nice. That's amazing. Oh, this is great. Okay, fantastic. Oh, good. We have a real range of sort of people who have never, ridden a performance bicycle all the way to Canyon riders. That's fantastic. So let me tell you a little bit about Canyon bicycles. So we are a German brand. We've been around for just about 3 decades, though we started actually in like a little trailer that was kind of driven around from race to race in Central Europe. And since then, we've grown into the world's largest direct-to-consumer bicycle company. And as you can see from what I've sort of selected here in terms of images, what we offer really runs the gamut. So we have, you might know, we have actually a lot of teams that we sponsor and professional athletes. If any of you are MVDP fans, Mathieu Van der Poel, we just signed a 10-year contract with him yesterday. We've had him already for 8 years. And now we get him for 10 more years, which is super exciting. So we have relationships and teams like Alpecin and De Koenig, also Canyon Collective on the mountain biking side. We started as a performance road cycling brand. So that was really where we were kind of born. But then over time, we moved into performance mountain biking, including all of the disciplines, downhill, enduro, cross country, etc. And then eventually, around the time, maybe about 5 to 7 years ago, we moved into the urban and fitness genre as well. So we also offer commuting bicycles or bicycles you can put a child seat or a trailer on the back, but always with this very high performance minded. So you'll always find sort of the most optimized specs, but obviously we really benefit from being a direct to consumer brand, which means that we don't have to pay the middleman, right? We don't have to pay local bike shops. So we pass on that cost savings to you as well. So Canyon is really special. We also have e-bikes. We offer a lot of e-bikes in basically every single discipline. And essentially, you should absolutely go to canyon.com. I won't be offended at all if you're browsing and looking at the pictures while you're listening to me, because our pictures are fantastic and it's always really fun to drool over the bikes. So that's just a little bit about Canyon. Let me tell you about some of our challenges and obstacles. So as you can imagine, we have quite a few. Maybe the first one, Jess, is supply chain issues. So this is not over, unfortunately. This was a big issue during lockdown and during COVID starting in 2019-20 a bit. And it hasn't entirely resolved. There was a huge bike boom during, the pandemic. And which was very exciting because obviously we want to get as many people on bicycles as possible. But of course, that was happening all around the world all at once. And then all of a sudden, there weren't enough components for all of the bike companies to share. So what did that lead to, Jess? That led to a really terrible customer experience, right? So in terms of their experience on our website, they might land on a page and every single size was sold out. We had a lot of, a lack of availability because we weren't able to get the components that we needed. This is actually exacerbated or made even worse by the next issue, Jess, which is, you may or may know, I think a lot of people who are more on the enthusiast side of the spectrum here, bicycles are made up of lots of different third-party components. So there isn't actually very much that Canyon makes ourselves, besides the frame, the cockpit in some cases, the seat post, but pretty much everything else comes from third-party manufacturers like SRAM and Shimano and DT Swiss and things like that. So we are completely dependent on our third-party partners in order to actually sell a product, which is obviously make things quite complicated when we have unreliable supply chains. But also, maybe the next one, being a direct-to-consumer bicycle company, you might think, buying a bike online that I've never sat on before, I've never test rode, I would never do that. And obviously that is super reasonable and is a big challenge for us because obviously our bikes are not cheap, right? We're not selling 100, 200 euro bikes. We're selling bikes that can cost you up to 10,000 euros, right? And it is a big risk for people to want to purchase something that large without being positive that it's going to fit them or that it's going to work for them. So this is a real challenge that we've tried to combat in terms of having really amazing sizing tools and super reliable sizing tools online, and then also offering things like events and showrooms and things like that where people can come and try out our bikes. And then finally, the last big challenge for us is maintenance. Those of you who have bicycles might know this. Bicycles need to be maintained. The more that you ride them, the more you wear out parts. And this is not a failure of the manufacturing. It's like a car, right? It's something that over time you have to put effort into. You have to lube your chain after every ride. I hope everyone's lubing their chains after every ride. This is my number one tip to keep your bike going. But this is also a challenge because if you buy your bike at a local bike shop, you know exactly where to go every single time something goes wrong or you need to update it or upgrade a part if it isn't something that you're comfortable doing yourself. And obviously, as a direct-to-consumer bicycle company, this is also a challenge for us, which we've combat through associated service partners, which is, kind of trusted bike shops in as many areas as possible that we know are going to work well on the canyons so that we can get people there and we don't have to send bikes back to Koblenz in Germany, for example. So those are just a few of the challenges and obstacles that we face as a direct-to-consumer bike company. But maybe to talk about something a little bit more positive, what we really have in our favor is our community. So those of you who have canyons or know someone that has canyons, we really have passionate customers. And I think this can be true. I mean, obviously, it's easy when it's a fun product like bicycles, but I would really recommend to find your sort of passionate enthusiasts, the evangelists for your products, because they are so excited and so ready to give you feedback and to help you drive product development in the direction that's going to work for them. We have, local bike gangs in almost every city where people with canyons will come and ride together. It's really a special community. And for us, it's as a UX designer or UX researcher, it's so ideal because it is so easy for us to get people who want to talk to us and who are willing to share their feedback and things like that. So speaking of that user research and feedback, let's talk a little bit about what we do at Canyon. So when we're talking about user research and analysis at Canyon, as you maybe heard earlier, we do not have a UX researcher. So the UX designers actually do and the UX writer, we do all of our own user research and analysis, which is, quite fun and exciting and also very directly, influencing the concepts we're creating, but also a lot of work. So our tech stack for user research or more customer centricity includes Hotjar, obviously, which I'll talk about most tonight. We use Lookback for user interviews and usability testing. We use Optimal Workshop for card sorting and kind of information architecture things. We use Calendly to book. We have unfortunately, very manual process at the moment. I think Hotjar has done something great to improve that, and we would love to get involved with that. And then obviously we use Google Analytics for analysis as well. And Hooray is a GDPR compliant kind of compensation tool to send out gift cards to research participants. So not a huge tech stack. We work with what we've got. So let's talk a little bit about our relationship with Hotjar. So as has been mentioned, Canyon and Hotjar, we really love each other. We go together really, really well. We rely on Hotjar almost every day. We're using Hotjar or some feature of Hotjar to help us reach out to our customers or to influence our concepts. But what I have to say is we don't have a huge budget, unfortunately. So we actually have very low traffic coverage. We're only covering depending on the days, we're covering between like 8 and 15% of our traffic coverage. So obviously this is a huge bummer and I would love to change this, but it's just where we're at. And what we've actually done is we've learned how to aggregate data in a way that we can use the limited data that we have in order to kind of be more reliable. So let me show you a couple of ways that we've done that. So the first thing we do is with heat maps. So I don't know how many of you guys are Hotjar customers, but of course, if you'll know exactly what I'm talking about if you're a Hotjar customer. If you use some other analytics tool, I'm sure it's comparable, though I would recommend moving to Hotjar because they're great. So a heat maps, we have this issue where we have actually like 16 different locales, right? So we offer, or no, I'm sorry, that's not even true. 16 different languages and 80 different locales. So we have localized URLs in 80 different countries around the world, what that means is it's really challenging for us to get sort of, if we only got specific data, for example, on the German site in English, we would only see one subsection of actually what the entire customer's experience is. So what we realized is using URLs, we can actually aggregate data on specific pages around the world. Now, obviously, there are some differences often between markets, so it's really good for us to be able to kind of drill down into specific markets to see how things are different. But if we want to get more reliable data, for example, here, this is the perfect positioning system, which is the PPS. It's our bike sizing tool. And if we use the URL ends with the positioning system, we don't have that localized because the perfect positioning system is sort of a, patented algorithm. We can actually aggregate all of the data across the world and then get a sort of aggregate heat map to see in general how people are moving. Then, as I said, we can drill down into specific markets. So this is one way that you can use this to sort of make sure on a budget, make sure that you're getting more reliable data. We also use, you can move to the next one. Yeah, we also use Hotjar to spot issues. So there's a really great, on the dashboard, you can kind of set this up and it will give you an example of pages that are having the highest amount of issues, of problems. And then even cooler is that you can actually watch recordings that are connected to those issues so that if you're not exactly sure what's going on in terms of the payment, can you go back? Yeah. So, for example, we had a lot of issues in the US in terms of payment. It turned out it was our payment provider was having some sort of an outage at this point, right? And so obviously the code, we've got, tracking there as well, but it's always good for us to also have sort of like a qualitative look on what's going on and be able to actually even show recordings and say, hey, this is the exact point where this broke down and guess what the customer did with it or something like that. So spotting issues is really awesome and helpful for us and something we do with Canyon. The next thing we do is recordings. So I mentioned recordings. We are obsessed with recordings at Canyon. So there are many of us, not just on the UX team and the UI team, but also in terms of merchandisers. We have people in the categories who are always curious about what are our customers doing on our website? What kind of information are they consuming? What do they skip over? And obviously, it isn't super efficient to make decisions based on one or two recordings, but it is really helpful to dive deeper into specific areas when we maybe have quantitative data and we really want to figure out what might be going on. Because, of course, quantitative data such as Google Analytics can tell us what is happening, but it doesn't tell us why it's happening. So we've used recordings quite a bit to be able to dive in. This is an example. I'm showing you all of the filters we used. We were working on improving our checkout flow and reducing the drop-off rate in checkout. And we weren't exactly sure why people were leaving during checkout. So what we ended up doing was this amazing combination of filters, which told us when people left the cart and went into checkout, but never saw the order confirmation page. So that gave us this super broad sort of, 4-step process to see where people dropped off. And then we could actually watch recordings and see what was the point, what were the points at which that wasn't working. And what turned out is we have that issues. We have that input field issues. That was one of the things we figured out. We've now since localized that and offered more explanation information. And we saw actually a reduction in drop-offs on that page. So the other thing I would recommend is watching recordings as like an empathy building practice. So obviously we use recordings on very specific projects to be able to sort of triangulate quantitative data, etc. But what I also recommend is taking 15 minutes on a Friday and just randomly going through recordings to watch and see how your customers move. What I guarantee is that it will surprise you and maybe scare you a little bit. People are very, very erratic in the way they move through pages and things like this. And there's no way that we would know that unless we were actually able to watch what they're doing. So super recommend watching recordings. Okay. Then we can talk a little bit about incoming feedback. So, excuse me, let me take a sip. So we have incoming feedback from Hotjar set up on all of our desktop and tablet pages. And we really love this, but we don't love it for quantitative feedback. And I'll show you why. So as you can see here, 3.6 out of 5. Go back a sec. Sounds pretty good. I would love to be able to share that with my stakeholders and say, look at this, 3.6 out of 5, let's get it up to 4. But then what you'll see on the next slide is we often get 5 out of 5, and the comment that they leave is fun. And I'm pretty sure that they're talking about this bike, which it's true. This is a really fun bike. And I'm not thinking that they're actually talking about the user experience on the website or the moving through the product details page. So I can't really trust that 5 out of 5, that has something to do with the UX on the website. And on the other side, we'll get the next one, Jess. We get a 0 out of 5 or a 1 out of 5, and it says it's a bike shop, but there are no bikes to sell. You won't be shocked to find that this piece of feedback was like in the middle of the pandemic, which like it's true. That's absolutely true. But there's really nothing that I can do about that. And it doesn't actually help me understand what the UX on the website is. Of course, we could have a discussion about the full user experience and having out of stocks and that sort of thing. But of course, I'm responsible for the UX and the UI on the website for right now. So this is why we don't actually rely on the quantitative feedback, but we absolutely rely on the qualitative. And in the hot sauce talk, I give you a bunch more fun and interesting qualitative feedback. So check that out on YouTube. So we also, you can go to the next one. We also use Hotjar to reach out to our customers using surveys. So as I said, we're really lucky to have extremely passionate and excited customers, which means recruiting for interviews and usability testing is super easy. And we do it just by putting a survey somewhere on the site targeted and saying, hey, are you a new MTB cyclist or interested in owning a new MTB? Yes. Can you give us 20 minutes? And literally overnight, we get hundreds of emails. Now, do all of those people end up showing up for interviews? No, of course not. We have, this is the fun part of user interviews, but we have enough people that we can send out, emails and invitations in batches so that we can be sure that we're going to get the amount of people we need in order to make the data reliable. So we also use surveys, just for the next one, in terms of content testing. So this first one, the first two, you can see it says, do you have 3 minutes to help us improve the Canyon outlet navigation? We were testing wording there, trying to understand if people understood new old stock or used bikes or things like that. So we asked them to look at something, and then we basically tested them and said sort of like, what kind of outlet bikes do you think latest arrivals refers to? And then gave them a few different options. And then what we found was, okay, most people understood the difference between these categories. So you can also do that. Then we also, the next one, we also use surveys for customer satisfaction or to track the performance of a new feature. So we tested out a different way of purchasing a bike or of building a bike, I guess you could say, on the product details page. And what we asked was, once they had gone through part of that experience, we said, how would you rate this new way of selecting a bike? And why did you say that? And then, of course, we always take the opportunity to ask them more questions. So then at the end, we also say, cool, do you want to talk about your experience? Because we would love to call you and figure out what you liked and what you didn't like with it. So those are just a few ways that we have used Hotjar, or any sort of tool like Hotjar, to bring in customer insights a bit more into our day-to-day life. What I would love to ask now is ask all of you, you can go to the next one. Yeah. What are you doing already at your, in your company to reach out to customers and to bring more customer centricity? And what ideas do you have to do even more? Like, how can we do that? So I think, Carissa, can people raise their hands or just jump in? How does that work?
Can raise your hand. You can also, if you feel like just typing it out, you can do that as well. And we'll stay on this slide for a little bit just to kind of see what comes up in general. I don't have any hand raises yet, so
maybe really quickly I'll respond to Lisa, who's saying Hotjar highlights rage clicks as well, which is absolutely true. That is so helpful. The rage click, you can see which pages people have rage clicks on. One little tip, though, is what we've found is that we have often product sliders on our product listing pages. And occasionally people just click through the sliders really, really quickly. And then that registers as a rage click. So sometimes you get very excited because there's, oh my God, this page has had so many rage clicks. What is going to happen? Like, what's going on? And then you go and you're like, okay. It's just, they're just going through the slider quickly, not finding maybe more content feedback than like UX feedback.
Well, we have our first answer. And it's from Marks, and he said, we've been capitalizing on the momentum discovery and continuous discovery has been having in the product management world. Design and research skills transition here quite well around common goal.
That's amazing. Yes, I talk a little bit about continuous discovery in the Hot Sauce Talk on YouTube. Sorry, I'm plugging that so much. But what I would ask is, how are you doing that, Marks? Are you, is that sort of like an incoming feedback, or do you do like a weekly session with customers? Maybe, yeah, any more specifics around that?
Whole new process being implemented.
Cool. So you're in the process of it. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think it can look, continuous product discovery can look so many ways. And I think in some ways, even having an incoming feedback widget on your site is continuous product discovery, right? Because essentially customers are offering examples or things that aren't working for them, pain points, things that are frustrating them, things that they love all the time. But if you can take it even further and have some sort of a group or some sort of a research panel that you're reaching out to all the time, it's fantastic.
Somebody else asked for the link to your Hot Sauce Talk, so I just added that as well. Just Daniel, that is in the chat as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else before we move on? Lisa. We used to have a regular user feedback coffees every 4 weeks, inviting 4 users for an hour for a 15-minute quick interview and rotating UX designers interviewing them on their topic.
That's amazing. That's such a great idea. And what I would also say, Lisa, is that, I don't know, I'm assuming you were doing that because it's coffee in person, but you could also do that remotely, right? Like get the people who are willing to sort of meet with you, compensate them by sending them, I don't know, a 10% discount to your product or an Amazon gift card or whatever it is. But you can even do this remotely if your customers are all around the world. Great.
Good. I can also jump in and tell you one that we do within my team, which so Sarah's focused a lot on the feedback tool, and we do the same. Like we have feedback across the whole Hotjar product, as you probably see, and for our Ask product specifically, the surveys and feedback, we're categorizing all of those. Well, all of the constructive elements that come in. So ones that are like, oh, this is great, we love it, we just ignore those because they're not the juice we're looking for. And we take all of these kind of more negative or constructive ones. And we actually built a quarterly report with those, which I just finished last week. And it's really, really interesting to see, there are some themes that come up time and time again that are pain points that we know we need to address. And then we kind of use these to get the buy-in for the roadmap, to kind of dictate what we'll work on in the coming months. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. We have this report, a bunch of the comments around usability. So then we kind of sit down, go through those with the designer, myself, and the product manager, and we kind of prioritize, okay, we've had this many comments about this specific aspect. What initiatives can we think of? How, where's the priority in line with that? And we kind of come up with these different ideas, and then the designer and I go away and we work on some proposals for present them back to the team, get a rating of how technically difficult this is. So we're really inputting that into our day to day. And coming back to what you said about the recordings being super surprising, they never fail to surprise me. Some of the things you see, users don't do what you think you've built this seamless flow and it's going to go, A to Z perfect. No. It doesn't ever work out like that. So super recommendation from you to just spend those 15, 20 minutes a week watching through some, because you'll definitely learn something.
Learn a lot. Yeah. I love this too, of putting it into a report, right? Because then that's also accessible to external stakeholders, or, to people beyond your team or beyond the product development process. Obviously, we want our user input to be affecting the things that we're working on in terms of product development, concepting. But obviously, we need to bring more customer centricity into our entire organizations, right? And what better way to do that than to elevate our customers' voices and bring it to external stakeholders? So the idea of a report is brilliant. I think I might take that. Thanks, Jess.
Perfect. Well, I think that means we're ready for our Q&A. Am I wrong?
I'm ready.
We're ready. We're ready to go. This is great. Okay, let's open this up. Now, remember, if you have any additional questions, we have quite a few. So if you have any additional, just get those into the Q&A now, and I will try my very hardest to make sure we should have enough time. But definitely get those in. Let's start. And the first one is for Jess. From your perspective, what role does content design play in enhancing the overall user experience? And how does Hotjar contribute to this?
So I'd first I'll say that there isn't really an experience without content. Content is everything you see. It's the words, it's the images, it's the graphics, it's the whole lot. So, I'm very glad to hear that Canyon has a UX writer in Sarah's team as well. And just remembering, what did the rest of the question say?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I can see it. Okay. To be honest, from a Hotjar specific perspective, we're very much embedded into these teams that we work with. So as I mentioned before, I'm working on Ask and Engage, and I work completely alongside the product designer. So whatever, or the product designers, they have two. So whatever they're doing, if they're running user research sessions, I'm running user research sessions. And, we're getting this kind of feedback, similar stuff to, as Sarah's already mentioned, doing some surveys to find out the best wording, running tests, running usability, interviews as well. Just, anything that we can be part of, we are. And then we take all that feedback and we do stuff with it. So from past projects I've worked on, we've done a bunch of stuff around information hierarchy and, different ways of presenting the information, and our users understanding these terms that we're putting out there. How can we simplify this? A lot of what we do within the product, it's quite complex if you're just jumping in the first time and you've never used Hotjar. There are a lot of terms to get behind. So we try and make these, as accessible as possible. And where they're not, we can kind of link out to some of the materials that Carissa's team puts together in the help center, and kind of all the video content that they give us. So, sometimes that's embedding a video into the product by to kind of give that tutorial for the first time using a feature, things like that. So we're all working quite harmoniously, let's say, together. And from that just eases the experience for our users. I don't know if I'm really answering the question, but hopefully kind of got that.
I think it sounded pretty good, and we love supplying you with the content, so it's a great harmonious relationship there. This one looks like it's specific for Canyon, Sarah. So can you share any specific examples of user feedback or insights that have led to significant improvements in Canyon's product or digital experience?
Yes, that's a great question. We're trying and aiming to basically use user feedback to drive or influence all of the kind of new concepts that we're working on. But I think maybe a good example, I mentioned, talked about the PPS, the Perfect Positioning System, which is our sizing tool. Maybe something that's important to know is that sizing at Canyon is quite special. It's quite unique. So it doesn't automatically match to other bike companies. We have a very, very wide range of sizes. Our founder is I think he's 195 centimeters tall. So super, super tall. And which means that we have bike sizes from 3XS to 2XL so that we can really cover the range. But what that ends up meaning is that it doesn't always line up exactly with our competitors. And then obviously that can bring a lot of frustration. We have, people who are so used to being an L in every other bike brand, but then actually an M is what would be best for them at Canyon. And our the bike sizing algorithm that we use is amazing. It's based on tens of thousands of data points that were professionally measured. But previously, on every single product details page, it was a form. And it was just enter in your height and enter in your inseam. Yeah. And there was maybe a little help modal to show you how to do that, but nobody clicked on it. And so what we found is that we were getting so many errors, so many issues, right? And when we did a bunch of research, we realized that some people were entering in their pant inseam instead of their inner leg length, right? Thinking oh, I don't have to measure this. I already know my pant inseam. It's fine. What I also did was spend a ton of time on the Canyon Reddit, for example. We have a subreddit of very passionate people. I looked on forums. I looked on basically everywhere to try to see what were people saying about our sizing and about our sizing tool. And most people were feeling skeptical at the beginning because they didn't understand why we recommended an M. Because of course they entered in their measurements and then they click show size and it says, we recommend an M. And then that's it. And then, right. So they weren't feeling like they could trust that because they weren't sure that was so different for them or what they didn't expect. Then you would also hear Canyon customers saying oh, go for it. I was also skeptical because I thought that I needed a bigger size, but it fits me perfectly. But of course, people still needed this sort of, they needed this understanding or this push. So what we ended up doing was actually doing size charts and putting size charts on our product details pages. And even cooler, if you've used the PPS tool, which we turned into a wizard, which teaches people very specifically how to measure and also shows them the average inner leg length for their height. So that if, for example, they're way out of the range, they're not as surprised when they get an error message, right? Or they think, oh, and maybe I need to measure again, right? So we gave them context so that they could measure more. We gave them instructions. We gave them context so that they could see where they were compared to other people with their height. And then we actually, on the size charts, showed them exactly where they were in terms of that size spread. So they could see, okay, based on my inner leg length and my height, I'm right here. Oh yeah, I'm actually pretty far away from an L. That makes a lot of sense to me. Now I understand why they are recommending an M. I'll get the M and I will ride off into the sunset very, very happy. So I think that's one example where we really took the input. We did surveys on the website in terms of getting feedback. We did interviews. We did scouring of forums and things like that to find out what were the issues. And then created a pretty, I think it's something I'm quite proud of, a pretty comprehensive and significant change to the way that we present our sizing tool that has gotten really good feedback and has reduced the amount of returns based on sizing. So that's exciting.
I loved those examples. I love the context of like, oh yeah, no, I have an error message. Like I measured my inseam wrong. Like you're just like, did you or is something wrong? Yeah, that's great.
Totally. Because before that, you have no idea. You're like, no, I'm sure that's my inner leg. Like that's it. You're like,
very personal. I know what it is.
I don't really have legs that are twice as long as everyone else. Maybe I should measure it then.
Well, that's kind of a great segue, not the inseam part, but the actual different methods that you're using. And this might actually be something you can answer as well, Jess. But somebody asked, how do you tackle distribution or distributing the research insights within the company? Do you like good old presentations, newsletters, Slacks, or do you have like a repository for people to check themselves?
That's a great question. Maybe I'll start. I mean, I love this report idea, so I'll let Jess talk about that. But we actually have a repository, a research repository, which is available and accessible to everyone in the company. We also we have a consumer insights team, which does more research on the sort of research and development side in terms of building the bikes and that sort of thing. So we sort of cross-reference between the two because obviously there's a lot of similarity in who we're reaching out to, even if we're looking at slightly different things. And I think most people know that this repository is available, and also I will link to it all the time when they ask for things. So I make them know that it is available and they should always refer back to it. So that is, I think, the biggest way that we do it at Canyon. Maybe Jess, you can talk a little bit more about the report that you were talking about.
Yeah. So that is a report that it comes from a bigger initiative that we set up, which is like a usability framework for the design team, basically. So we can kind of measure some metrics, and the feedback report makes up part of that. And all of this does live in Confluence. We made kind of like a very lightweight template where you can kind of fill in the gaps, as it were, and kind of separate things by theme. So I mentioned before we had a bunch of comments about usability, that we might have some about the filters that are available in surveys, or customization requests for, let's say, for when you're creating your survey and you want to be able to change the font or do something else. So we have kind of these like placeholders, and then depending on the comments that come in and how they're organized for that quarter, just kind of chop and change those around. But sharing wise, like very much sharing on Slack. So usually it's within like the group level. So for me, that would be the teams working on surveys and feedback and engage, like the introduced product. But at the same time, we have like our big product research channel. So a lot of the more strategic stuff gets shared around there. And also other designers might put a shout out for, hey, has anybody done any research on this thing? Or does anybody know anything about that thing? And we're all just kind of dipping in and sharing our insights. But like I think every time anybody does a research project, there will be some aspect of a report coming out of it, whether it's like, super in depth with a bunch of videos from the interviews and quotes and all this stuff, or, just some more lightweight. But those do end up getting shared around specifically between the product and the design and research teams. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of reading all links and any links and all reports in general. So I'm an absolute metrics nerd. So this is so fun. Like I feel like I want to dive in and try to find these now.
I could send it to you. I do go do an hour and download stuff.
Check it out. We do have a few Hotjar questions to answer that I want to get to before we are done for today. One is from Daniel, and he asks, "Can you integrate Hotjar with native apps?" I have no problem answering this, Jess, if you would like me to. Yeah. Okay, great. I'm going to answer what I think you mean by this. And then if I get it wrong, please call me out and message in the chat. Daniel, I'm serious about this. But we have a variety of integrations. We actually have someone in the chat, Casey, who has worked a lot with the integrations landing pages and integration menu that we have within hotjar.com. Basically, we can integrate natively with a good number of apps. If you don't see one that is natively integrated with Hotjar, you're able to use webhooks. You can work with Zapier. If you're familiar with Zapier, Zapier's like, it can do all, especially if you don't have the developmental resources. So definitely take a look there. But yes, we do have a few. After I'm done answering the next question, Casey read my mind. Yes, that is the URL right there, hotjar.com/integrations. You can take a look, see if your integration that you're interested in is there. And if not, I can promise you there is a way to do it in most cases. If you can't really see anything on the integrations page, feel free to reach out to the support team, and we can definitely point you in the right direction. And then we had another one for Hotjar. How do you raise the completion rate in Hotjar survey? So this does not actually have to be me. This can be either one of you. How do you raise completion rate in a Hotjar survey? Their completion rate on surveys I created is not so great. I've tried to limit it to maybe 1 or 2 very easy questions, but the completion rate is still very low. I have an answer, but I'm very interested to see if either one of you have something for that.
I also have a bit of an answer.
Very good. Go for it.
Sarah's is going to be like, we have way too many customers wanting what do we got? No, I mean, we have a ton of people coming in, but we also have a low completion rate, which I can imagine is really challenging for if you don't have as enthusiastic and exciting customers as we do, because it works for us. But yeah, so I also have a thought, but I think I'll let you two go for it.
Okay, so what part of what I wanted to say is already in the question, like keep the questions as short and sweet as possible. I think the survey templates that we set up, most of them would have an absolute maximum of 3 questions. We did a bunch of research before actually launching the survey templates, and we had a whole host of workshops with a surveys expert, and that was kind of the findings of her entire book on survey best practices. It's like 2 or 3 questions max, and in the most simple wording possible, like mix up the content of it. Like your questions have to be clear. The pages that you launch them on, like the type of survey can also play a role. So is it one that pops up and disturbs the customer experience in like a vital moment, and is it going to frustrate them more, or is it somewhere where they're a bit more chill, just riding the bike, maybe in Sarah's case, and they're not going to be as put off responding to that? Or is it one that you have always on? Like, is it an embedded survey? Is that placement maybe going to get you more responses? It also depends on exactly what you're trying to achieve from the survey. Like, so when we do this feedback report, part of that, part of the usability framework is to have this UX light survey, which is asking, how does the product meet your needs? How easy is it to use this tool? What's the reason for your answer? Like 3 simple questions. And that's one that we run kind of periodically per quarter. We don't want to bombard users with this one because it can be a bit, disruptive in the experience. So I think like having the purpose of your survey is very clear, and also not overloading your site with too many, like very, very specific moments. Like if you want to reach out and get those users for a user research, like make sure that interaction counts. Because you don't want to, spam your users, put them off coming back to your product in the future. But I also want to have both your thoughts.
No, I mean, that's 100%. The spam one is a huge one, right? Because even if you have too many of Hotjar ones, right? You have a survey on scroll, you have a survey that lives, or you have a feedback widget, and then they all show up different times in the pagelet. Like it's not going to be cool. But this is actually perfect because mine comes from like a localization approach. So what we find a lot of the time, especially going through support tickets or talking with users one-on-one, is that actual response rate really varies by location and culture, right? And so it's something you don't usually think about whenever you're doing these, or you're setting up widgets, but like we can already see it as like the help center, right? Everybody sees the Hotjar help center when they're using Hotjar at some point or another. And so even though we have a consistent consistent visiting rate from all these different countries, we have various different types of response rates, right? So people in America, we get positive and negative responses. People in the UK, we only get positive responses. We very, very rarely get any negative responses in the UK. France, we get none. Germany, we get none unless we really have one that is like if an action happens. So if they click on the up or down vote and a survey shown, that's when they fill it out. So, and the only reason why we notice these things is because we look for these patterns to see, okay, why this is weird. Why does this only happen in specific regions? And so I think a really great exercise to do, especially if all of those changes that Jeff suggested don't help or you're not seeing a lot of that response rate, is try to figure out the issues localized, like in a localized sense. So focus on your biggest market first, take a look and say, okay, if I talk to a UX professional who is specialist in this market, what are some tips I can get for them? Is the culture in general where I'm from overly positive? Are they overly negative? Do they not like to interact with these type of things? And it can kind of help you make adjustments to how you serve these feedback widgets, these surveys, and also the kind of questions that you're asking as well. Very good. Well, we have 2 minutes left. And Daniel, I see yours. I'll shoot you a message afterwards, because there is one that Sarah did mention on during the talk that I think is actually really interesting. So somebody asked, have you ever found a solution to asking users about their satisfaction with the UX rather than bikes? So they go on about, they have the same situation that you mentioned about people are leaving feedback about the product rather than the tool. And even if they put on the site, like, please don't rate the product, smiley face, people are still saying like, oh, I don't like this bike. So have you ever figured out a way to try to change that?
It's a great question. So no, we also updated the feedback widget. So it very explicitly says, it doesn't say, please don't rate the product, but it says, do you have any feedback about the website? And we still get this in. But what I would say is, maybe a kind of tongue in cheek, what I said at the end of when I was showing you that is that, ultimately, maybe it isn't possible to separate the customer experience from the website compared to the entire holistic customer journey, which includes for us, obviously includes availability of bikes. It includes service. We get a lot of comments. We're quite well known for our positive service experience. But of course, the people who reach out to tell us about our service are generally the ones who've had a not so great experience. So we end up getting a lot of those comments as well. And what I would almost posit is that we actually maybe need to look at it in a different way, which is not that, which we can filter out the qualitative feedback that is specific to our jobs and for the web shop. But actually, this incoming feedback is really a holistic feedback of the entire customer journey. And therefore, we have people, for example, from the support center who also review the feedback as well, so that they can jump on things. We send the feedback to the product developers, so the people who are designing the bikes as well. So maybe it's not possible, and maybe actually we need to reframe a little bit and make it a bit of a bigger customer experience question, just in general.
I love that, honestly. So you're just like, no, we have not. That's great. Well, I have had an amazing time. We are 1 minute past, so I'm so sorry for anybody that has another call to go to. But we really appreciate you joining today. Thank you so much to Sarah. Thank you so much to Jess. Genuinely has been an absolute pleasure preparing for this webinar, because you two make this so much fun. So I really appreciate it. If you have any other questions, make sure to reach out to Hotjar, reach out to Canyon Bikes if you want a bike, because maybe I'm going to start riding bikes soon. Make sure to check out Sarah's talk on hot sauce. It is actually amazing. Like, you have definitely, please check it out. But yeah. Head to our webinars channel for our next upcoming webinars in the next couple months. Customer Education has one as well coming up next month, specifically about using AI paired with our surveys and feedback. So maybe we'll even have an answer to how to help with completion rate on that one. Stay tuned. But other than that, have a great afternoon, have a great morning, depending on where you are, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much, Carissa.
Yeah, thank you, Hotjar.
See you next time, Sarah.
Yeah. Bye.